I've made what many regard as a radical and politically impractical proposal, but I believe in it very deeply, Larry. Here's what I think we ought to do. I think that we ought to eliminate the taxes on employment, the payroll taxes that discourage jobs, and make it up dollar for dollar. No tax increase, tax revenue neutral, but eliminate the payroll tax, make it up dollar for dollar with pollution taxes, principally CO2 taxes. And yes, that would raise the price of gasoline, but it would come back to the American people in the form of sharply reduced taxes on payrolls.
We must get an agreement in Copenhagen at the end of this year to prevent climate change disasters that science has told us lie in wait for us. Second, a number of influential voices in civil society, investment, business and science are demanding exactly those changes that I've described. Industrialized countries must commit to clear emission reduction targets towards the IPCC recommended cuts of -25 to 40% by 2020 over 1990 levels. First, rebuilding financial stability. Second, new job creation. We must get an agreement in Copenhagen at the end of this year to prevent climate change disasters that science has told us lie in wait for us.
This bill, if it's passed into legislation, which I think it will be, in the course of the next year, will constrain every future UK government to ensure that its carbon emissions do not exceed the level of budgets that are agreed between a carbon committee made up of independent people and government itself. The bill will have impacts for government itself and the way it runs its own operations, for businesses who should now have clear and consistent messages about the way in which the UK is determined to lead the fight against climate change, and also for individuals. Because in the end, this isn't something that governments and businesses can do alone. We need the choices that individuals make about electricity, about heat and about transport. Also to respect environmental limits and to ensure that we live within our means environmentally. I hope that this isn't just a bill of interest to people who live in Britain, because obviously climate change is a global problem that requires a global solution. I believe it's vital that advanced industrialised countries, richer countries like the UK, do take a lead and fulfil their responsibilities to cut their own emissions. But it's also important we use that leverage to ensure that countries who are seeking development, quite rightly, have a choice to choose a low carbon path of development rather than to repeat the mistakes of the industrialised countries. Therefore, I hope this bill will give confidence to people in developing countries to know that a country like the UK is determined to fulfil its responsibilities, but is also determined to be part of a worldwide coalition to tackle climate change. The bill is going to be debated far and wide in the UK over the next few months. We're having a pre-legislative period so that everyone, whether in business or in schools or private citizens, can have their say about the climate change bill.
The economic situation is no excuse for delaying on climate change. Quite the opposite, because we know that the longer we wait, the more it costs in terms of climate change. That's what the Stern report showed. And I also think there are ways that we can tackle the economic situation that we face and the climate situation that we face. For example, the interest that President-elect Obama has shown and that we're showing in Britain and that others are showing in so-called green-collar jobs.
Green-collar jobs are those that combine the occupational demand of the new energy economy, that's based on alternative production of energy, with the needs of the displaced blue-collar workers that have lost their jobs throughout the United States, with the exodus of many manufacturing industries to other countries where wages are lower.
Is a sign that you can tackle both things. They are, first of all, tough developed country targets. Secondly, a commitment from developing countries to move away from business as usual in terms of emissions. And thirdly, a flow of finance from developed to developing countries. And I think you need all of those three things for a deal. Now, I actually happen to think that the prospects on all three of these are greater than they were a couple of months ago, or at least there is starting to be the signs of momentum that we need on these three things. That shows a willingness on the part of the UK to talk about these issues of finance and find a way forward. And I think all of us accept, I think this is really very important, that finance must be, and technology, must be part of an eventual agreement at Copenhagen. I don't think it's about governments alone. I think it is about business and the role they play. British business has played an incredibly progressive role in arguing that climate change should not be relegated as an issue, should remain an important issue. I think it's about the role of citizens in saying this is something we care about, this is something where the government needs to make a deal. I think it's about the role of faith groups. I think there's a huge number of people that need to be mobilized as part of a global campaign to make this happen, because governments, Martinez and I, and other people of goodwill can make change happen. It requires leadership, but it also requires people themselves to show they care about this.
The UK believes the challenges were difficult, but the commitment and consensus by both developed and developing countries is key if an agreement is to be reached in Copenhagen next year on climate change. According to the UK's Energy and Climate Change Secretary, tackling climate change can go hand in hand with economic growth.
Carbon budgets are an opportunity for us, not just to ensure we meet our targets, that is important, but also to ensure that we change the culture of government at every level, so that every important decision must be thought about in the context of carbon budget. And either it will be accommodated within that budget, or decisions will have to be made to offset or find other reductions in emissions elsewhere to take account of decisions that are made. Because for an individual company, the incentive to invest in what is essentially a not fully proven technology is insufficient. Yeah, this isn't about sort of a DIY country. Because if you had a DIY country without any role for government, then where would the funding come from for all the important things that people want done in a particular area, for example? What's the key thing about the internet? The key thing about the internet is it makes that easier to do.